And that's what led me to doing some work with Jack. And my partner ended up buying me out, and I did even more work with Jack. And then after a period of time, I went out on my own. I created this concept called excellent decisions, which is all about helping people make decisions and take action based on their vision and their values rather than all the external stress and pressure that we're under in today's world with media and social media and the boss and the spouse and the family and everything. You know, everybody's got something they want us to do.
Welcome to the Thriving Workplace Podcast,
the show that empowers your workplace to make a positive impact on your people, teams, and the entire organizational community.
Whether you're an employee, manager, or executive, we've got something for you.
Dive into inspiring ideas, practical tips, and meaningful conversations about employee well-being.
We're your hosts, Lauren and Jason, passionate workplace well-being champions from the Workplace Performance and Wellbeing Institute.
Join us as we bring in renowned experts and thoughtful leaders to share their wisdom, experiences, and innovative approaches to building a thriving workplace. Welcome back to another episode of the Thriving Workplace Podcast. This week, we're joined by an incredible international guest. He is the creator of the Excellent Decisions Value-Based Leadership Program and author of the book, Living a Values-Based Life. He is the former director of the training for the Canfield Training Group. And yes, he has very closely worked with Jack Canfield, the co-creator of the Chicken Soup for the Soul series. He's an expert in experiential learning, peak performance, and values clarification and leadership. So to talk all of those things, please welcome to the podcast, Robert MacPhee. Hello.
Hello. So good to be here. I wish we were doing this in person, but
yeah. Well, we're so excited to have you on here. It sounds like you've got a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge around the things that Jason mentioned. But I'd really like to start the podcast by getting to know a little bit about you, your journey, your story, and how you've ended up where you are today.
Okay. Well, you talked about my work with Jack Canfield, who is best known for those Chicken Soup for the Soul books that you talked about. But I actually worked with him on the training side of his company. He also wrote a book called The Success Principles, which is a very, very well-known book, but not quite like the 600 million Chicken Soup books that they sold. But I was actually an entrepreneur out of school. I was an entrepreneur, started my own business, and got into kind of the training and development side of our own business as it was growing very rapidly, and just fell in love with that side, developing people and creating culture. And that's what led me to doing some work with Jack. And my partner ended up buying me out, and I did even more work with Jack. And then after a period of time, I went out on my own. I created this concept called excellent decisions, which is all about helping people make decisions and take action based on their vision and their values rather than all the external stress and pressure that we're under in today's world with media and social media and the boss and the spouse and the family and everything. Everybody's got something they want us to do.
Yeah.
And I found that if I could help people really stay clear about their vision and their values and have that be what was driving the way they were thinking and the decisions that they were making and then the results that they were getting, then it was really valuable work. I loved doing it. People responded well to it. So that's kind of been my journey from the company I started. It was actually a parking company. So I was that guy out there running up and down the street, chasing down people's cars, but there was a real need for it. And it turned out to be a really good, kind of a training ground to get into what ultimately I really love to do.
Yeah. I'd actually like to dive a bit deeper into that and know why you're so interested in helping people with, their internal and values and building a culture. What made you sort of interested in that?
I think it was the response. It was the experience that I had doing that work when I was running a company. And the truth is I was doing that work for our company because, it was me and a partner, and I was kind of the logical person to do it. He was busy with other things. I had the bandwidth. I'll create a management training program. And I did. And I just loved it. I remember reading books like Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People and purchasing Jack's set of tapes about how to build high self-esteem and really bringing those things in. And, we were a very small company. We actually had a lot of employees because of the nature of the business, but a relatively small company. So when we decided that we were going to do something, we just did it. And I still love working with small companies because that's what I want to do. I want people to get excited about the work that I'm doing and say, we want to do that. And can you start next week? Whereas if I'm working with, Microsoft or something, it's okay, well, we'll do a proposal and we'll get back to you and we'll see if we can get approval. And in 6 months, maybe we'll have an idea of what, it's like, no, let's dive in and do the work. So I was really blessed. It was like having a laboratory. And as I was actually doing the work, and I was also doing work, I was out on the parking lots and parking cars and setting up the structure for all those kinds of things as well. But what really energized me, it's a great question, because it was really like the experience that I had that told me this is what I really want to be doing. This is what really energizes me, excites me, makes me feel like I'm making a really powerful contribution.
I want to dive into values for a little bit. But before we do, the term values gets thrown around a lot over here in Australia in professional and personal development worlds. Could you sort of define in your words what values are and why they're so important to us as human beings?
Well, I have a very simple definition of values, which is values are what is most important to us. And at the same time, the reason why I'm doing the work I'm doing the way I'm doing it is because my own personal experience with doing values work was that it was very confusing. It's pretty simple. Like, just identify what it is that's most important to you. It sounds really simple, but I was really struggling to make it work, like to create a list of values, to get clear about what my highest values were in a way that I could actually remember it and really apply it. So it was useful to me on a day in, day out, week in, week out, like on an ongoing basis, like really be like a guidepost for me. And I just couldn't get there. And my strategy that we use in the living a values-based life world is we divide values into two separate categories. And the first category is what we call priorities, which is what is most important to us, the things that are most important to us, the areas of our life that we put time and attention on. And then the second category is what we call ways of being. It's qualities and characteristics. Like, how do I want to show up in the world? What kind of experience do I want people to have of interacting with me? And those are like both things that are really important to me. Like, it's important to me to put my time and attention on the things that are really important to me. It's also important to me to show up in the world in a very particular way and to be conscious of that, to make a choice. So, like, for instance, on my own list, one of the things that's on the top of my list of priorities is my relationships with my children. And I have really great relationships with my children. And then on the ways of being list, I have, for instance, like kind and caring. It's really important to me to show up in the world and be kind and caring. And those are not the same thing, which was what was confusing me as I was doing the values work. I would have, family and caring, and yeah, they're both important, but they're just different. But as soon as I separated them and put them on two separate lists, it's almost like making it more complicated in order to make it less complicated. It's like a strange thing about it. But what I ended up with was two lists. And I could look at one list and say, am I putting my time and attention on the things that I've declared are most important to me? And it's a yes or no question. I either am or I'm not. And if I'm not, I can make choices about what to do about that. What can I do to create more time, to shift my time, to let go of something that's not on this list so I can put more of my time and attention on the things that are really important to me. And the same thing with the ways of being. Like, I can self-assess at any time. Somebody cuts me off in traffic. Maybe I wasn't so kind and caring in that moment, but I can self-assess and I can have that awareness. Okay, that's not who I am. That's not who I want to be. And those two lists have served me really well for a really long time in the way I show up in the world, the relationships I have, the way I run my company, the way I work with my clients. And it became clear for me.
I'd really like to give the listeners some ways that they can tap into this. I know you said that that you're kind of in alignment with your values because it feels energized, and you mentioned words like that. So I'm putting two and two together, and I'm assuming that when you're living by your values, you're feeling energized. But I'm wondering, how do people know if they're aligned with their values, and how do they start to really define their values? Is there a bit of a process they need to go through?
Yeah, the work is very much a process. And here in California, it's a process. But, Potato, right? But it is very much a process. And the book that I wrote called Living a Values-Based Life, it's almost like a workbook. It takes people through a process to look at values and why they're so important, to explain this distinction of the two different kinds of values, and then to go through step by step and look at what are my highest priorities. And we try to do that in a way that addresses several different learning styles rather than just looking at a list and circling the ones you like and picking your top five and voila, you're done. We ask questions that are kind of an intellectual exercise, but we also encourage people to do like a guided visualization to really tap into more of a heart energy and go deeper with the kind of questions that we ask. And then the same thing with both categories. I can tell you, like, if people who are listening want to kind of scratch the surface on this, I can tell you two questions that we use to kind of start the process. And the question we use, they're very simple. But the first question we use when we're looking at priorities, we ask people to just take a pen and a blank sheet of paper and give themselves like 3 to 5 minutes and just sit down and answer the question, what is important to you, over and over and over again. So for me, I would say, what is important to you? My relationships with my children. What is important to you? My health and well-being. What is important to you? Making a contribution. What is important to you? And just keep going. Just keep answering that question, because sometimes beneath the ones that come to mind first are some really juicy, like, ooh, yeah, that's really, beyond the house and the car and the money and whatever, like, ooh, my relationship with this person, or for me, contribution is a really big one. So the first question with priorities is simply, what is important to you? And we have people make it in 3 to 5 minutes. They might get 20, 30 things on their list, and then go back and look for, like, what are the most important. And then with the priority side, with the ways of being, with those qualities and characteristics, it's not so much of a question, it's completing a sentence. And the sentence is, it is important to me to be. So if someone takes 3 to 5 minutes, again, with a blank sheet of paper, and just says, it is important to me to be peaceful. It is important to me to be strong. It is important to, whatever comes up. It's different for everyone. There's a lot of similarities that come up. And it's one of the good things about doing values work is we start connecting with people on a deeper level, because we get closer to that sense of what we have in common, versus the world we live in sometimes shines a very bright light on things that appear to be different. But when we do this values work, like, we find a lot of commonality with people. But those two questions would be a great way for people to just kind of, again, scratch the surface and start getting clearer. It's been very interesting to me since doing this values work, how few people in the world can articulate their highest values. Like, I haven't found a study yet that gives me an actual percentage, but for years I've been in this conversation about, this is the work I do, and I tell people values are so important, and people go, yeah, you're so right, values are so important. And then I say, well, most people can't articulate their values, and they get this like sheepish look on their face, like, oh my God, he's going to ask me what my values are. But then it's really cool, because I get to say, and we have a new way of doing this. We have 2 categories, and people kind of light up like, oh, good. Like, of course I don't know my values. Nobody told me there were 2 categories. So it kind of lets them off the hook and allows them to re-engage and let go of the guilt for not knowing their values.
I suppose that brings me to my next question then. Why do you think people don't know their values?
Well, here in the US, the reasons that I see over and over again are first of all, it's just not taught. Most parents don't have like a specific like strategy for teaching values like that, to actually get it on paper and create a list and create it in a way that's actually memorable. The other thing that I see is, because values are confusing to a lot of people and kind of just done on the surface, a lot of times there's people who have done some sort of values work, but it's in a drawer somewhere and it's in a file somewhere. The one that breaks my heart the most is we have companies that have a beautiful sign up on the wall, but it's just gathering dust because no one's really keeping an eye on whether we're living in alignment with those values. And with companies that really aren't living in alignment with their values, having done the values work and put it up on the wall can actually do more harm than good. The biggest impact company-wise to the values work is in the area of culture and creating, like we like to say, we want to help you create a company where people love to work for you. Like they're excited to come to work. Their own personal values are aligned with the organizational values. They know they're making a difference. And it doesn't have to be like world peace or solving world hunger or whatever. My business partner and I actually, this is long before I was doing the values work, but it ends up being an interesting example. We're running this parking company, and a lot of our clients were restaurants. And the moment that we realized that the work we were doing parking cars at these restaurants was actually all about the first and last impression of our client's customer. So these, people would pull into the restaurant, we would take their car and park it. They would go inside and have a drink and have dinner, and then they'd come out and we'd get them their car back. Well, if we screwed it up, on either end, this poor restaurant owner is pouring their heart and soul. And oh my God, the restaurant business is so hard. We could screw the whole thing up. And they were trusting us. These were two just out of college kids, really. And they were trusting us with the first and last impression of their customer. And we started to look at our business that way. And it fundamentally changed the way we approached it. We weren't just two kids who were parking cars and, going to the beach and whatever. Like we took it really seriously. And it was like a values-based approach. Again, this is long before I was in this whole conversation about values. But to me, I remember that moment fundamentally changing the way we did business. And I think it gave us a real competitive advantage over our competition, which was mostly people like us, kids who park cars and created a company and didn't really know what they were doing. But suddenly we had kind of an unfair advantage because of that perspective, focused on something more important than just parking cars.
Actually, tapping into that a little bit more, because it's something that we do a little bit with our clients, and it's something that we find workplaces really need. You say about the sign gathering dust, and we definitely see that happening over here as well with different organizations. And they think they're doing the best, right? And they are. They're doing the best they can with the knowledge they have. So I'm wondering what knowledge you can give them right now, just one piece of how they can start aligning their employees' values with the company values. I know it's a process and it takes time. There's a lot going into that. But what is one thing they can start doing today?
Well, no, it's a great question. And it's something that I did not know going into this work. I thought that for an organization, sharing the organizational values in a really clearly communicated and compelling way would be the best answer to that question. But what I learned when I got into this, and this one there is very real research around, is that the best way to create a really engaging culture where people really feel great about where they work starts not with the organizational values, but with being willing to support your people in clarifying their own personal values. Mm-hmm. So when a company makes that gesture and says, you as an employee, as a team member are so important to us, we want to give you that experience. Like we want you to clarify your own values. And then the next step, which will come later, will be then we'll look at like your values and lining those up with the organizational values. Because the truth, and people sometimes won't do that because they're afraid they'll lose people. But if you're going to lose someone because their values don't line up with the organizational values, we might as well get it out of the way sooner rather than later, right? Because it's not a good situation either for the employee, for the person working there, or for the company to have someone whose values don't line up. I have a daughter who got a PhD, a degree in math. I think it skips generations. She definitely didn't get it from me, but she's brilliant with math and she does data science. And when she first got out of college, when she first got out of this graduate program, she took a job with Microsoft, which was a great opportunity for her. And she was, after 9 years of college, all of a sudden she's making all this money and she's got stock options and bonuses and benefits and all this stuff. It was really great. But she was doing data science for the supply chain at Microsoft. And she just wasn't lit up about that. She wasn't that excited about that. And she grew up, my kids were very young when I was working with Jack Canfield. So you can imagine the kind of parent I was, drove my wife crazy. But they had the advantage of really learning about this stuff, about taking responsibility and having a vision and setting goals and all this. There was no flip chart and PowerPoint at the dinner table, but it was just kind of like the way they grew up. So she gets this stuff. And eventually she said, you know what, I'm going to take a little bit of a pay cut and work somewhere that really aligns with my values. And now she works for an organization. It's a medical research company. And her work is focused on AIDS vaccine research.
Wow.
So she's doing very similar work. It's crazy math that I could never possibly understand. And she's taking all this data that's coming in from all these studies about AIDS vaccines, and she's writing algorithms that help this company actually make it usable. And she loves it. Like, she loves where she's working and what they're all about, because I believe, I'm biased, but I believe her values really line up with this organization's values. And so it's a great situation for both of them. And she's not going anywhere. She loves it there.
There's so many factors in performance, but I think values is one of those huge factors that comes into it for sure.
Yeah. So reflecting on your daughter just then, she had almost a desire to leave Microsoft because her values weren't aligning. And now she loves it where she is, working for her company now. What, in your opinion, the idea of sort of desiring that change, but then now resisting change as well, how do they form with values, if that makes any sense?
Oh, it totally makes sense. Did you read my book? Because the very first chapter of the book is about something that I call the change paradox, which is like, as human beings, we desire change. You know, we want things to be better. We want to make more money. We want to improve our relationships. We want a bigger house, a nicer car. It's just kind of part of being human. We strive to improve, to make things better, which is change, right? But then as soon as things start changing, the other thing about being human is we like freak out. They're like, oh my God, something's different. We got a danger, you know, I'm getting, my personal well-being is at stake or something. And so there's this kind of push-pull that goes on with people where they both desire change, but when change starts happening, they resist it. And for most people, it's going on completely unconsciously. And I actually have a model. I talk about, you know, I've been doing this work for 25 years. I only have 3 original pieces of content. Most of what I do is drawn from other people's work that I've learned. But this whole thing about 2 categories of values, that's mine. I invented that. I don't know of anybody else who's doing that. And this change paradox model is the other thing. So this model that I teach about the change paradox is designed to help people understand why that happens and what we can really do about it. So kind of in a nutshell, it's kind of like, it's like a 20-minute explanation, but in a nutshell, like if people, like the example that I use is usually a health and fitness example, where people decide they're going to make a change. They're going to go to the gym. It's January 1st, they're going to make a New Year's resolution, and they decide they're going to make a change. So they get right into action, right? And they take action, they exercise, they eat better, whatever, and they start getting results. But they have a self-image of themselves being like overweight and out of shape, and they don't like to exercise or whatever, that doesn't match the new results they're getting. So that's where the discomfort happens. Like, I have a belief about myself that I'm not in good shape. I don't like to exercise. I've never been able to keep the weight off, whatever kind of stuff is going on. And so when I start exercising and losing weight, that's why it gets uncomfortable. It's like being out of balance. And the only way to get back in balance is to stop exercising, right? That's the easy way. Then I go back to being overweight and out of shape, and it matches my self-image and everything's good. So the other way to approach it is to like the personal development world. And this is a part of personal development I don't really like, power of positive thinking, well, affirmations, and I am healthy and fit, and this kind of thing. And that doesn't work either, usually, because what people forget is something called self-talk. Like, we all have this conversation going on in our head, right? So we say, I am healthy and fit. And a little voice in our head goes, who are you kidding? You're not, you've never been able to, blah, 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 blah. Your mother was right, whatever. And so we go back again to thinking the way we were thinking, and people stay stuck. They never can kind of break out of that paradox of wanting change, but then feeling the resistance. And what we teach as the way, and values work is a really important part of this, the way to break out of that does start with kind of the affirmation side of it, with the self-image, but with the awareness of how this model works. Because if I declare, I am healthy and fit, and I'm ready for that voice to come that says, no, you're not. And I say, thank you for your feedback, but no, I really mean it. Like I'm serious. Like we are committed here. And we keep affirming and holding that image until we get an idea. We start thinking differently. And the idea says, well, you could join the gym, or, well, you could throw away all that ice cream, or whatever idea you get, which puts you into action. And the action will, especially with health and fitness, if you eat better and exercise more, you'll get in better shape. So you get the result, but then the new result, called being in better shape, matches the new self-image that you declared. And I believe that's what we talk about, comfort zones. You guys have heard the expression comfort zone, right? You need to get out of your comfort zone. You need to expand your comfort zone. Well, what does that even mean? Most people they have an idea, but they don't really know. Well, to me, this defines a comfort zone, because if my self-image, I'm healthy and fit, matches what I see in the mirror, look at me, I lost 20 pounds, whatever, that's a comfort zone. And that's like homeostasis, balance, right? And for most people, when they're trying to make a change, this is a really kind of eye-opening piece of awareness, because they're caught in that kind of push-pull. Like, I was really surprised. If you hadn't read about that in my book, I don't know that anybody's ever asked me that specific question about the resistance to change and the desire for change at the same time. And it's like a trap. People get stuck and they get frustrated and they don't understand why can't I just lose those 20 pounds? Like, why do I make it so hard on myself? And this model kind of explains it to them. Like, okay, that's why it happens. And here's what I can do differently. Start with my belief about who I am, and don't listen to that voice in your head when it says whatever it says. Change your thinking, change your actions, be patient, because these things don't happen overnight, but the new results will eventually come.
I really love that definition of the comfort zone, because I've never actually heard it like that. And now you've explained it, completely makes sense to what we've been taught, and also what we've seen in people, because we see it all the time, the desire for change, but then also the resistance. And it's really interesting. You see it in people's behaviors, and you're thinking what you're saying is not matching your actions, and there's a gap there. I think exactly what you've explained is sort of experience.
And that step of ignoring the voice in your head that says, no, you're not, or no, you can't, or you'll never be able to, or whatever, that's the step where the values work comes in and becomes really important. Because like we have a course we teach with a series of Zoom calls where we take people through this process of identifying their priorities and their ways of being and looking at how to implement it. And it's a 7-week course. And we had a woman in our last group that we did, and she shocked me. She honestly shocked me. I had no idea this was even happening until the final call. But at the end of 7 weeks, we were on the last call and just talking about, how did things go? What do you think? How could it be even better, or whatever? And this woman says, well, this was really great for me. I lost 30 pounds. Wow. And I was like, I shouldn't have said this. I should have been like, well, of course you lost 30 pounds. That's what happens for everybody. Right? But I was like, what? Like, you lost in 7 weeks, you lost 30 pounds? And she was like, yeah, I just, you know what? In that first call where we were looking at our priorities, top of my list, what's really important to me in my life right now is my health and my well-being. And I've not been taking very good care of myself. And in that moment, I made a decision based on identifying that value and recognizing how important it was. She made a decision that she was going to eat better, and she was going to, I think she was just walking. She was just like, I was going to go for a walk every day and throw out all the junk and eat good food. And she lost 30 pounds. And she, we're on a Zoom call. I don't know. You don't even know if I'm wearing pants right now, but you never know. But I'm not like 300 pounds or something. So 30 pounds was significant for her to lose in 7 weeks. And when people get really serious, whether it's their business or their health or money or whatever it is, when you get really serious about it, then that voice in your head or whatever else comes up becomes a lot easier to navigate through.
It's so important to have that level of awareness too. We were talking about it before. weren't we, about, you can't change anything that you don't know. And I think it's important to do these sorts of courses and working with mentors because they start to increase that level of awareness.
Yeah.
Maybe be that outside perspective and go, oh, did you realize this? And maybe notice your, that voice in your head and all these sorts of things that we go about our daily life and you just have no idea about. We didn't a couple of years ago before we came into this world of personal development. We thought, wow, now I've taken a moment and people have actually said this. Yeah, I do have this voice in my head and it is saying this thing over and over. And this is causing this action, which is causing this result. And you start to put the puzzle pieces together.
That was exactly my experience when I was first exposed to Jack Canfield's work. And I was at Jack's 80th birthday party just a few weeks ago, and I was holding up a set of tapes that I bought when they were probably 30 years ago or something. And they were falling apart. It was cassette tapes, and it looked really old and decrepit. But that was my first exposure, and I had the exact same experience that you're talking about with the awareness. And how can we make choices and really improve our lives, one, without having the values criteria to know what improving our lives really is, and two, to have the awareness about the fact that it's possible and how to do it and what strategies work or don't work and all that. So yeah, it's very exciting. That's why I love doing things like this, is because I don't know who's listening to your podcast, but you know what, if just one person heard one thing and it just went like ding, that's what I needed to hear, and they were the one who lost 30 pounds or whatever, it's all worth it.
Yeah.
Actually, I have a sneaky question. Is that okay?
Yeah.
I was just thinking as you were talking, Robert, when, especially as we're dealing with corporate businesses too, and it made me laugh when you were saying about, bigger businesses and you've got to have your proposal and then 6 months later. And I find it really interesting. And you talk to different types of people in this industry. And there's some types of people that they have that level of awareness a little bit already. They're aware of the problem. They're aware that they need help and they're calling upon that. And that's why you make that connection and then you start the journey with them. Mm-hmm. Some people you talk to and you can see clearly that they need your service or they need your help and you can help them. And you're so excited, but they're just not there. They think that they're okay. They don't have the problem. So I'm just curious, where would you take that? Do you believe that there's something you can do to help them become more aware of their problem themselves? Do you kind of leave them and just love them for a bit and hope that they come back? What is it that you do?
Yeah, I mean, you can probably tell I'm very passionate about the work that I do. And it is sometimes very frustrating to see a company, and especially their culture and the way that people are interacting. I mean, any company, any organization at some level is just a group of people with an objective that they're trying to achieve, but it's a group of people. And when they're not working effectively together, like you said, we get around this work and we start getting more awareness about what working effectively together looks like, what it feels like. And when you see that that's totally possible, and maybe they're just really close and it would be, just a small step, but they're just not ready to make that step. Mm-hmm. I hear what you're saying about like the frustration of that. And yet there's also just a reality, like you can't force people. I think this is like the parent in me talking, right? Like you want to force your kids, what's best for them, but you've got to just let them, live their life, run their business, do what they want to do. And I think part of your question is like, what can you do about it? If there's other coaches or consultants or people who are in a similar situation, I have found the single best thing I can do to get through to someone like that, if there's such a thing, is to keep asking questions. The more I'm trying to like tell them what to do and the answer is going to come from me because I'm the all wise and knowing being or whatever, it never seems to work. Yeah. But the approach of just listening and asking questions and clarifying those questions and going deeper and getting more specifics, if there really is a problem and there really is a benefit for them, value for them, if they discover it themselves, it's so much better than, again, if I try to be Mr. Know-it-all. And one of my highest values is humility. So that's probably why I say that too, which is good to know, because if I start becoming Mr. Know-it-all, I've been really blessed. Like I've worked with some amazing teachers, and sometimes like people will say, well, this is the issue that we're dealing with. And I want to just like jump out of the screen at them and say, oh, this is what we need to do. We'll start here. We'll do this. We'll do that. But I just keep asking questions, keep listening. What would that mean if you, and let them come to it in good time.
Well, Robert, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast today. If people wanted to find out more about your work, particularly around values, or want to read your book, where can they go to find all that?
The book is on Amazon. It's called Living a Values-Based Life. You can also, I can't really say this. Well, so is your audience all over the world, or is it primarily in Australia, or do you know? Or
Yeah, we have a few listeners over in the US.
Okay, so normally what I say is if you're going to get the book, go to valuesbasedlife.com, which is our main website, and get the book there, and I'll send you a signed copy. But I think it probably costs me $20 to send the book to Australia, and it'll be on a boat, and it'll take 6 weeks to get there. But if you order it, if you're in Australia and you order the book, Amazon is probably printing in Australia. You probably get it the next day. So get the book in Australia. We'll figure out how you and I are going to meet in person. You bring your book and I'll sign it when we meet each other. And at that website, valuesbasedlife.com, there's information about the course that I was talking about and the work we do with organizations. We also have something new we're doing. It's called the Values Advantage at valuesadvantage.com, which is specifically for leaders, because that's really one of the areas I'm zooming in on this conversation we've had today about leaders and organizations, and like Lauren, you were saying, like, how do we get them to take that step? And we start with helping them clarify what their highest values are, and then move into professional values and organizational values from there.
We'll put all of that in the show notes as well.
Great.
If you missed any of that, check out the show notes below.
Perfect.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. And we have one more question for you before we let you go.
I thought we were done. I was this close. I was this close to a clean getaway. What, one more?
No one escapes this question. So we ask this to all of our guests. And if you had 30 seconds of advice for anyone listening right now, it could be anything, something we've spoken about, something we haven't, what would your advice be?
Wow. What we covered about that comfort zone model, I think, is a thing I would go back to. I think it's so fundamental for people to have that awareness, like you were saying, about what gets in our way and what we can do to kind of break that cycle and create a new cycle. And there really is a way for people to not just break out of their existing comfort zone that's not working for them. Because if I'm 50 pounds overweight, I'm not happy about it, but I can be comfortable. Like, I can be familiar, and I can be so used to that I'm just not able to break out of it. And when people learn that pattern and are able to literally create a new comfort zone using the kind of the pathway that I described, it is life-changing for people. So that would be the thing that I would go back to.
Thank you for joining us on this week's episode.
If you got value from this episode, it would mean the world to us if you could take 20 seconds out of your day and leave a 5-star rating and written review.
And remember, you have the power to make a lasting change in your workplace.